Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Heather, and on this channel we like to walk a very fine line between a shopping addicted makeup monster and a responsible adult with a makeup hobby. Now, I really enjoy eyeshadow singles, duochromes, multi-chromes, blush, highlight, lip gloss, basically everything except pressed glitter. And today we're going to be talking about palettes that come from brands where I only have one palette. This is the singles show, okay? So if that sounds like something you're interested in, stick with me. We're getting into it right now. So today we are going to be doing a video talking about brands where I only own one palette. And I just wanted to talk about these like Lone Ranger brands in my collection. I thought this would be like maybe 5 or 6 palettes because I have brands that I'm pretty loyal to that I buy very frequently from their brands. But I actually accumulated quite a stack of palettes. And I've tried to organize it a little bit so it's a little easier to follow along. I think, let's see. Let's start with dead brands first, and then we'll work our way backwards. Because in the dead brand category, I do have sort of an honorable mention trio that we're going to talk about, which are these 3 palettes. So, Midas Cosmetics, the only palette that I have left from Midas Cosmetics is the Smoky Glow palette. I did pick up their, was it Flower Child palette at one point, and I had the yellow 9 pan that they had because it was like a raved about product, but the quality on the 9 pan was so bad, I passed it along, and all the shades were falling out. I had to manually re-glue every single shade back in over the course of like a couple of months. And I wasn't even using the palette. They just weren't staying glued, which was ridiculous. And then the Flower Child palette, I passed along without even trying because I was so disgusted by the other one that I decided only to keep this launch. And the other brand that is involved in this trio is Drench Cosmetics. So Drench Cosmetics did a collab with Neon MUA, and they came up with this Lunar Retrograde palette, which is so cool looking. Like, it's sort of pastel. You've got just a handful of neutrals, otherwise very colorful palette. I love it, right? And then at one point they came together, these 2 brands, and they collabed to make Genesis. So because this is like a single palette from the both of their brands, and then I have one palette individually from each brand, I'm sort of using this as an honorable mention. This is what I'm talking about. Like, the pans just fly out. Ah, there's another one. You see this? Like, this is nuts. I shouldn't have to fight this hard to keep my palettes glued in. And what kind of like La Croix of glue are we using in these pans? No wonder they all fall out. Like, god damn. All right. So, honorable mention is those 3 palettes. And I don't think either of those brands actually exists anymore. That was the other reason I put them in the dead brand category. But anyway, so next up, let's talk about Hasina 2. This comes from Blush Tribe, and goodness gracious, can I hang on to anything today? I picked this up like ages ago, and I've used it a couple times, and it had this like cult-like following. I think because of the packaging, this was like really colorful and interesting for the time when it was made. But for like present day, this is not terribly special. It definitely feels private label. So I never felt inclined to buy a second palette from this brand, and then the brand like disappeared. So then it didn't much matter. Next up, I have one from Ruby May, and I'm not sure if they still exist or not. They may, but in my mind, it's just like whatever. This is their Kush palette, and I like the mix of like warm toned and cool toned purples in here. Definitely a private label kind of vibe, so I was never inclined to buy another palette from them. But this one was kind of interesting. I think I got it in a subscription box. This one I know I purchased myself. This is the Tiffany's palette by Peachy Queen, and they may or may not still be in business, but again, I just kind of think of them as no longer in business. They've done some shady stuff that has kind of turned me away from the brand in terms of like poor customer service. And this palette in particular, I think they had to pull it because of like copyright infringement for like the Tiffany's logo and everything. So yeah, but this palette still exists in my collection. I think it's a cool palette, definitely private label formula. It's not a very special formula at all, but I I like the look of it, the vibe of it, and the look that I did with this palette I really liked. Next up is Aether Beauty. I think they went out of business like last year, and I have decluttered this palette I think twice and then put it back in my collection because I just think it's so pretty looking that I feel like it has to be capable of making a nice look, but I've never actually put this on my eyes. I've swatched it several times. I've never put it on my eyes in a way that I felt was like satisfactory. I may have used it for like extra shades for one look in the past, but otherwise I don't think I've ever done a full look just with this palette. Next is the Jaclyn Strawberry Fields, and although I do have several Morphe palettes in my collection, this is the only like Jaclyn palette that I have. I do have her collabs with Morphe, well, one of them. I have one of them from the original launch, but otherwise I don't have any Jaclyn specific palettes. So I did figure I'd show this one. It's very okay. And I think that's part of the theme that goes along with a lot of these palettes is if I try the brand and the first palette I try is very okay, I'm not terribly inclined to buy another palette from them. So this was a Lone Ranger for that reason. And then last up in the dead brand category is Makeup Geek. Now this is their collab with Manny MUA, which is old, very old. It's one of the oldest palettes in my collection, and I don't feel bad because it still smells good and it still functions very well, which is shocking to me. But yeah, this brand is long gone. And the subsequent things that they put out after this, I just was not like hyped enough to want to actually buy them. So I never got on with buying another palette from them. Had Jaclyn actually held up her end of the bargain and done a palette with them, I probably would have purchased it because back then I was still like very hyped for Jaclyn. But now, no. And now the stuff that Marlene is doing, I don't know what on earth that woman is doing. She seems very nice, but just very lost. And this new like not an MLM but kind of an MLM, so let's fix it so it doesn't sound like an MLM beauty school thing. I don't know, that's just above my pay grade. All right, let's get into what do we want to do next. I've got indie, I've got drugstore, I've got like high-end, mid-range, and I've got unused stuff here too. Let's do drugstore next because it's a small pile. Milani, Salt and Pepper. This is the Hot, Cool, and Vicious eyeshadow palette. I don't think I ever picked up the other one, but I thought this one was pretty cool. Or maybe I did pick up the other one and I decluttered it. I definitely debated about it for a long time, but this is the only Milani palette I have left in my collection. I used to have some other like 9-pan, 12-pan kind of palettes from them, but I just slowly decluttered them because I didn't really see myself ever coming back to them, like circling back to use them. This one is one of the earliest videos on my channel, and it like blew up because I think nobody else was trying this palette when it first came out, so that was kind of like really exciting for me. So it holds fond memories. Plus I was like a child of the 90s, so I definitely enjoy the nostalgia part of it. So this one gets to stay even though I don't really use it much anymore. And then the last one in the drugstore category, I put Hip Dot in here just because it's so cheap generally, and I don't know, it could definitely overlap with indie a little bit, and we'll jump into them next. But it is sold at Ulta, so I felt like drugstore was a better category for it. I really like this palette. I am a girl, well, I was a Girl Scout. I'm not a Girl Scout now, but this was like my all-time favorite cookie. I love this sort of like mauve purple color story. I did say in my original review, I wish these two shades were slightly more different because on the eyes they look literally the same, but I do think it's a pretty color story otherwise, and it smells like the cookie. I love that. Oh, and I guess I should say, the reason why I never bought a second palette from Hip Dot is that most of the other palettes they've put out since then, including the Monopoly palette, which like I really almost did buy just for the nostalgia of it all because I am a Monopoly freak. I ultimately haven't bought any more from them because they do a lot of pressed glitters in their palettes, and I get so tired of pressed glitters in palettes. So they really need to like wow me before I make a purchase. All right, let's get into some indie palettes next. The Season of the Witch palette from Notoriously Morbid. This is the first palette I've ever tried of theirs, and I do think this is a really pretty palette. It's one of the ones that I'm trying out for February. It's not part of my original bundle, but I did get it in February, so my mission is to use all of those palettes. So here we go, and I do think this is a really, really pretty tones. It's definitely a handmade formula, which you have to work with a little bit differently. The shades are a little bit drier, more like a Copacetic or Shine by SD, that sort of like drier formula, but I think the sparkle and dimension that the multi-chrome shades offer is still quite nice. So for this particular brand, I suspect I will buy more from them in the future. I just haven't gotten around to it just yet because I literally just got this in the mail, I don't know, a week or two ago maybe. So I just haven't had a chance to try it long enough to sort of commit to buying a second palette. And then I do have the Fatal Beauty. This is the Frankenslay palette. This is the cover, or the sleeve, I guess I'll say. And then this is the cover art, which I think is really cool. They released this as part of a Halloween trio 2-ish years ago, and this is a pressed glitter, which was a big minus for me, but the mattes were what I was interested in out of this palette, and I do like these mattes. Now, they are not the most intensely pigmented. It definitely feels like a private label formula, so whether or not I'll buy anything else from them remains to be seen. And now that I think about it, I'm not even sure if they're still a brand. Let's check. Wow, they are still a brand. But it looks like a lot of the stuff is on sale or on clearance, so I don't know how much longer they're going to be a brand for. Sorry about that, my camera battery died, but this is the Unicorn Gang Shop palette. Unicorn Gang Shop palette, goodness gracious. And I do really like this palette. I think it's kind of got that like bog witch kind of vibe. I think the mattes in here are like very smooth and buttery, despite the fact that I still think they're probably private label. I think they're a better formula than some of these other private label things I've mentioned. And I do really like the metallics. The metallics are not like multi-chrome or duochrome or anything like that, although you could sort of make the case that that one is. But in general, they're just like a straight up metallic. I think it's a nice palette. I have not seen anything from them recently that like really caught my eye that made me want to jump in and buy more stuff from them. So for them, it's not that I wouldn't buy more products. It's just that I haven't seen something that really like caught my interest. Next up, Gloss Gods Smoke and Mirrors. Now, when I placed the order for this palette, I almost bought like 6 things at once because I was like, if I'm going to pay for international shipping, I think this is from like Sweden originally. If I'm going to pay for the shipping, I might as well get a bunch of things, right? And then I was like, Heather, but you don't even know if you like the palettes. You don't know if you like the formula yet. Like, just try one. So I ordered just one. And I'm kind of glad that I did because the metallics in here, phenomenal. I love the metallics that are in here, and this multi-chrome in here is delicious. But the mattes are really, really thin formula, and I really don't like that at all. Like, I wish they were a better formula because the formula they have here just isn't cutting it. And so until I see like a lot of reviews saying that their formulas are getting better, I don't think I would buy more of their palettes and pay to have them shipped all the way to me. The only exception with that would be if there's like those all duochrome, all multi-chrome palettes where I think they're different from the ones I already have. I'll make mention here too of Martine Cosmetics. This is the 669 palette, and this one kind of suffers from the same issues. The metallics, the duochromes, the multi-chromes in here are great. The multi-chrome formula is very thin. It's this shade, and that shade. They're very thin formula, so they don't get as impactful as like Davina or Cleona, for example. So that's kind of disappointing. The mattes in here I do think are nice. Definitely a little bit thin and powdery, but in general are nice. So it's just the multi-chrome formula in here that's quite lacking. And given how expensive these palettes are, the fact that they have to come from, is it France or Belgium? Might be Belgium. And the ginormous packaging, like I'm not trying to store a bunch of mediocre palettes that are this big. So I haven't bought anything else from them because of that reason. Next up, and this one I had a hard time placing. I put it in the indie palettes for now. This is the LA Splash Classic Horror, and I did get this in a subscription box, but it was such a cool palette, I just could never get rid of it. It's an all matte palette, but it's kind of like these grungy, muted rainbow kind of color story, which I personally think is a pretty cool concept, and I do like the sort of horror packaging. It's very like kitschy. There's been nothing that has released from them since that has kind of caught my eye. But again, this didn't even catch my eye in the first place. This was from a sub box. So for me, it would just be about seeing something kind of pop up that catches my interest, and I would be willing to buy more from the brand. Okay, Dominique Cosmetics Berries and Cream Palette. Now this one, gosh, is hard to open. Very strong magnets. I remember people like ranting and raving about how amazing these palettes were, so I was like all in to try them. And then once I tried them, I was kind of like, okay, like it's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. And I just never felt myself like an urge to buy another palette from them. I came very close to getting the rustic, what was that? Rustic lace or something. It had like a pink and a blue in it side by side that I thought was really pretty. And I did almost buy the full Celestial Storm palette because we got the mini in a subscription box, and the shades I was most interested in were not in the mini. But once I had tried this formula, I was kind of like, you know, I like the color story. I think it's a cool color story, but the metallics in here are dry. They're kind of underwhelming in general. So I find myself using mattes out of palettes like this and then going for metallics elsewhere. So I just didn't feel the urge to buy more of the palettes if all I'm using is the mattes. And then we have the Alamar Cosmetics Encanto palette. This is the only Alamar palette I have left. I did originally have the Reina del Caribe, but I did get rid of that palette at some point, and this is the only one that remains. I do really like this palette. I think the mattes and the metallics in here are quite nice. I think they all work very nicely together and they make very flattering eye looks. I would definitely be interested in buying more from the brand, but they have to catch my eye. The part 2 of the Reina del Caribe palettes just didn't, it's like a purple, or it was like Spanglish. I guess it was called Spanglish, but it was the same format. It's like purple and neutrals. Just didn't catch my eye, didn't wow me enough, and I haven't seen anything else from them since. So just kind of keeping my eye open for them. Now the next one, I do have other products from this brand in like face category, face palettes, but I don't think I have any more eyeshadow palettes from them. So I went ahead and included it. This is the Plant Gay palette from Trixie Cosmetics. And the palette itself looks like this. Now, I think the actual like color story is really cool because I like this sort of like swampy olivey brown shade in here. I like the greens and the teals, and I do think the pinks are nice too. The neutrals, again, I could care less about. The part that stops me from buying more palettes from this brand is that the metallics that are in here, while they are nice colors, are very standard metallic formulas. So there's nothing like really special about them. And then the 2 glitters, which are supposed to be the special things, these are biodegradable pressed glitters, allegedly. They are like a metallic mica with a glittery pigment put in them that definitely feels gritty to the touch. It feels very dry to the touch, and I don't like that formula at all. Like, I don't think it's nice to use. I don't think it looks flattering on the lids. So for me, I'm already like 2 shades down in this palette. These palettes, when this one, I think it was like $50. I mean, they're pretty expensive. So if I'm already like excluding multiple shades, I'm not in a rush to go buy more palettes from this brand. Additionally, I picked up the blush, like the face and highlight palettes. I really like those, the Decades ones. They're quite nice. But once you go beyond those palettes, in terms of like their subsequent launches, I feel like the subsequent launches have all been very like makeup as merch and not makeup as makeup that is made by somebody you like kind of things. So I've kind of fallen off of the brand a little bit. I am still like following them, so at some point if they launch something I'm interested in, I definitely would pick it up, but they're gonna have to really impress me with both color story and with formulas before I rush right out and buy. Next up, I have one palette from Suva Beauty, which again came in a subscription box. This is the Rose Period, and it looks like this, just a really standard pinky kind of mauve-y color story. I do really like the palette, but it's not anything super special in terms of the brand, and for a while you could only buy them off the Morphe website, which I've kind of fallen out of love with Morphe, you guys know. So I just was like, meh, I am not pressed to buy their products, and it's annoying to get them, so I haven't bothered. If at some point they were like launching maybe at Ulta or something, I might pick something up if it caught my eye, but I don't think I would go out of my way to try to secure this from like their own branded website just based on the formulas here. They're fine, they're just not phenomenal. Next is the Kraken Cosmetics. This is the Dark Matter palette, and I picked this up at Black Friday. I really like this palette. I think this is a pretty neat palette. I think originally it was like $40, $45, somewhere in there. And on Black Friday, they had a little bit of a sale, which made it a little bit more reasonable. I picked this up and like a blush. I think I would definitely pick up more from the brand, but I would want to see the price point come down a little bit. So only on a sale, because I think these are very pretty. They're handmade shadows. They're very soft and buttery, but then of course very, there's a lot of kick up in the pan. You're going to get fallout, that kind of thing. And the metallic and like duochrome type shades in here, like this is the duochrome shade. This one has a bit of a duochrome shift to it. Those shades are nice, but they're not like over the top wow. So they're a little bit more subtle. And because of that, I have a hard time rationalizing the $40 price point. So at some point in the future, I will likely get more from them, but it's going to have to be during a sale because there are several palettes that I have my eye on that I just can't pull the trigger for the current price. All right, next up is the Love Lux Beauty Pretty Powerful palette. Oof, can't believe I got that out on the first try. This palette was $88 when it originally came out. I didn't pay $88. It was on sale for half price Black Friday 2 years ago, and then I found a discount code on top of that. So it brought it down to like $40, which I was way more impressed with price-wise. I really like the formula. The mattes are a bit thin, but they do blend really nicely together, and the metallics I think are quite pretty. What made this palette so like special, right, is that these 4 shades had iridescent multichrome flakes put into the actual metallic pigment. And I think that looks really pretty in the pan, but in reality on application, you kind of lose that on the lid. So I couldn't justify purchasing more palettes from them. Number one, because they didn't have anything else like this. But number two, because that formula, although it seems really cool in the pan, doesn't really translate onto the eyes. So I'm left with just a standard matte and metallic palette, and certainly not paying $88 for that. Next is the Lorella Ocean Breeze palette, and this I picked up, I think Doodles by the Bunny did the like design work for this palette, which I thought was pretty cool, and part of why I picked it up last Black Friday, well, let's see, Black Friday 2022. And I do think the palette is quite pretty, but it is very standard, what I would say is private label formulas. The mattes are decent. The metallics are very standard metallics. Again, nothing really special about the quality of the formula. So I would definitely consider picking up another palette on like a sale if there was a matte color story that really caught my eye, but it would have to be quite special and very affordable for me to sort of go out of my way to purchase it, because otherwise I was not super impressed by the formula. All right, next up is Jolie Beauty Sirens palette, and there is a review up on my channel with this palette, and I even did try the pressed glitters. So if you guys are pressed glitter people, you might actually like that look. I think this falls into that same category. You've got 2 very beautiful black-based multi-chromes in here that are very special, very like metallic, smooth, creamy. Love them. The mattes in here are fine. The standard metallics that are in here are fine. Pressed glitters, I could live without. So for me, the size definitely is a detraction. The cost because of the size is a detraction. The fact that there's so many glitters is a detraction. And I just haven't been motivated to buy anything else from them because there is just so many things about the color story and about the palette itself that didn't wow me. But in the future, if they make something smaller, there's no pressed glitters, maybe there's more multi-chromes or like special kind of like duochromes, maybe I'd be more down for it. Another brand, the last indie brand that I have to talk about in terms of palettes that I've used for sure is the Be Perfect Carnival Interstellar 5 palette. This is the only palette I have from them, of course. And I definitely was super attracted to this. It's huge, but it has a really nice rainbow gradient, which I just find very pleasing to look at. The mattes in here blend out really nicely. The metallics are super, super sparkly, especially like some of these shades here. I do like this sort of duochrome quality of this one, and I love how intense this fuchsia metallic is. It's very pretty on the lids. There are two hybrid glitter shades in here. I have used them in the past. They're very all right. I don't know about their eye safety, so just be aware of that. And then I do really like this sort of like gray monochrome like columns here. I would definitely pick up something else from Be Perfect in terms of the formula here. I was impressed, but they would need to really impress me with the color story, because this is another brand that's coming from outside the US, is the UK based brand. So in order to pay all the like shipping and taxes and whatever to get it here, like wow me or I'm not buying it. Let's do my sort of like mid-range and high-end stuff, and then we'll get into the handful of things I haven't used yet. I don't really put too much credence between like mid-range and high-end, because most of what I buy I would probably classify as mid-range. I don't really rush into luxury very often. So the first one is Makeup by Mario, and I only have this little quad. This is the Party Glam quad, and I believe originally he put out like 3 or 4 of these and then kind of got rid of this formula or format and put out like the ethereal eyes and that kind of stuff. This was very okay. This one single matte I just think is not enough to make an eye look, especially because this matte is not going to blend into anybody's skin tone nicely. So on me, it starts to pull this like very muddy gray as I try to blend it out, and I just kind of have to use other things to make this work. The metallics in here are fine, but again, they're not like shattering stars or anything like that, so I haven't been inclined to buy anything else just because the brand is pretty expensive. Give Beauty, I did get a 9 pan, and I'm sorry, not a 9 pan, a quad. I'm trying to remember if I think I picked this one up at TJ Maxx and it was like $4 or $5, which is why I picked it up to try it, but then I ended up getting one as like a gift with purchase when I ordered something from Mercari, and I think I passed that one along to my aunt. But yeah, it's a nice little quad. It's decent. I'm not like above and beyond about it. I'm not like super into all matte looks, so this is a companion palette for sure. So to purchase another one from Give Beauty, I would need to see something that just like really wows me and makes me interested enough to purchase it, because all matte looks are not going to be that. Next up is NARS, and I'm actually surprised I only have one NARS palette right now, but this is the Climax palette, which was I think from fall like 2 or 3 years ago. I like the color story a lot. I like the quality of the formula a lot. I just don't know. Nothing else has really like sparked my fancy. I like how cool toned this one is, and a lot of what they make is very warm toned, neutral, heavy. So a lot of it I pass by for those reasons. If they make something else cool toned, I would give it a second look. Next is Pure and Raw Beauty Christy. So she had this collab palette that was like two-sided. One side was the colorful side, the other side was the neutral side, and I definitely bought it because of Raw Beauty Christy, because at the time I was super hyped for her and her collabs. I got this one, I got the ColourPop one, and I was really excited to get it. But in terms of the Pure formula, it's fine, but it's expensive for what it is. So I think there are indie brands that do so much better than Pure that I would never be in a rush to like purchase more from their brand. Next up is the Lime Crime Venus palette. This is the Immortalis palette, and it looks like this. One of my first forays into cool toned color stories, and I love it. This particular palette is wonderful. I like the sort of taupey and then sort of gunmetal-y silvers you have here, so they do have like a slightly different look on the lids. I think the gradient here is quite nice. I like that there's a burgundy-ish dark shade, and this ash shade kind of pulls a little bit blue. The white shade has some sparkle in it, which I think looks really nice, you know, in the inner corner or under the brow bone. And I would be interested in buying more from the brand, but the price, like, they need to wow me for that price, because their prices are quite expensive. And I'm not sure that, like, I could get this from Beauty Bay too, right? And this would be like half the price there. So for the color story, it has to really be impressive and unique for me to go out of my way to purchase from Lime Crime. Next is Violet Voss Sugar Crystals, and this is one of the very early on palettes that I did videos with as well, and I really liked this palette. I like that you have the bright row, you have sort of the duochrome metallics, and then the iridescence. The iridescence I often come back to just to pop something into my inner corner, so this palette has definitely been a love of mine. Now Violet Voss, their prices are, you know, pretty spendy, like $40-50 for a palette. And they're formulas are decent, but they're not like over the moon impressive. So I find myself gravitating more towards like indie brands to find stuff like this rather than mainstream brands, which is why I haven't purchased more from Violet Voss. I've had other smaller palettes of hers in the past, like the little 510 pans that they've done, but I've decluttered them or returned them just because they didn't wow me for the price. And then Patrick Ta, this is the Major Dimension 2 eyeshadow palette. So the first one was more neutral, and then the second one is like the slightly pinkier toned one. And my husband got me this for, was it our anniversary, Valentine's Day? I can't remember, about a year ago. And I was really excited to get it, and I did really like the formula, but Patrick Ta hasn't really released much else palette wise since then, and the other palette is very neutral. Since I already have this one and my preferred neutrals would be more pink undertone anyway, I didn't see a need to buy the first palette back, so I just have the one, but I'm not opposed to more. And then the last stack of palettes is stuff I haven't tried yet. And so these are all coming over the next, weeks to months in my planned palette stuff. First is the Salem and the Witch palette from Salem Cosmetics Nola, or New Orleans, however you want to say it. Now, this is the revamped palette. I did have the original palette, and I actually had not used it by the time they did the revamp, and so I went ahead and purchased the revamped palette and passed along the original. It's going to my aunt. So I haven't used this one yet either, but I am very excited to do so. We've got at least one holochrome in here, which I really like. You've got an iridescent duochrome, several other duochrome shades in here. This one actually, I think, is a multi-chrome as well. And so I'm just really excited to give this a try. I did order 2 more palettes from them, the revamp of the Buffy palettes, but I have not gotten them yet. They've not even shipped yet. So I'm still going to include this one in my list for now. Next is the NBA Cosmetics and Deandra Nicole Sunset Beach palette. And I've never tried NBA Cosmetics before, but they did this really cool, kind of warm toned, orangey, purpley, pink kind of color story. And I thought this looked very promising. This shade in some of the palettes and the swatches and stuff looked kind of okay, but I do want to give this palette an actual try and get a feel for the formula before I rush out to buy more palettes. Definitely not opposed to picking up more from them though. Although I did hear at some point there was some kind of drama with NBA Cosmetics, but I don't know exactly what happened. So if anybody does know, leave a comment, because if there's something that we should know about to be more conscious consumers, that would be good to know. Next up, this is the Ciate London. This is the Aspen palette, one of the editor palettes. Aspen is the specific shade, if you will. I think I've used this once or twice, and I did really like these 2 shades in here. I thought they were quite nice. Ciate, I just haven't seen anything that caught my eye, so I'm not necessarily opposed to buying more from them, but nothing else has really stuck out to me. What caught my eye about this palette is that it was so cool in its undertone, that I just thought that would be like perfect for me, now that I've sort of figured out I'm a cool undertone. Pink Crush Cosmetics did the Nocturnal Garden palette, and they had actually several palettes that came out that were this sort of format and had very different or very similar color stories with some slightly different mattes in them. This one was the most like green, blue, purple out of all of them, and so it was the one I was the most attracted to. I haven't had a chance to play with this one yet, unfortunately. And I'm not sure if this brand is going to be around much longer, because they did recently put everything on their website on clearance, and I'm not sure if they're planning to sort of like rebrand, reformulate, or if they're just kind of done. And then Dreamhouse Cosmetics, the Midnight Garden palette. This is a UK indie brand, and they posted this palette for sale 2 Black Fridays ago, and I picked it up and haven't used it yet, which is part of why I have my whole plan to fix my palette consumption for the year. But as far as this particular palette, I do think it looks pretty. The formulas look pretty standard, like maybe private label formulas, which is why I haven't like jumped at the chance to use them yet. When I first saw it online, it definitely looked like more dynamic for the shimmers and duochromes. So when I got it in person, I was kind of like, that wasn't what I was expecting. So that's why it hasn't been used yet. And then the last one that's from my like pile of unused things that have been sitting for a little bit is this Made by Mitchell palette. This is the Feet in the Ground, I think. Yeah, feet on the ground. The other one is the head in the clouds or head in the sky, or I don't know, something about sky and clouds. But this one, I thought it looked really cool. But again, the shimmers look pretty standard in here. There's nothing that really like jumps out at me. So I'm hoping the matte formula really impresses me. What I thought was very appealing about this palette was some of the just interesting undertones and shades that they had in here. So this sort of cool toned lime chartreusey pastel shade I thought was pretty different. I like some of the swampy kind of shades that they had in here. Then we had these sort of what I call like pantyhose nudes, where they're, you know, sort of slightly cool toned shades. I thought those were pretty interesting as well. So I'm excited to give this one a try. It's on my list for the year. I don't remember what month though. Then there was one more indie brand that I should have mentioned, which was Game Beauty. And I have used this palette. I was really not impressed with the color story. Well, let me say, I was not impressed with the quality of the shades in this palette, which is why I haven't purchased anything else from them. The mattes are fine. They're not like super duper pigmented, so I feel like you have to work to kind of build those up a little bit. And the metallics are pretty standard metallic formulas. There is a shade similar to this 3022 shade in a BH formula that I think is even better than this one. So why am I paying $40 plus shipping for this when I can get my BH formula palette out of my drawers here? There's no reason to. So for me, I don't think I'm going to be buying anything else from Game Beauty unless they really step up the formula. And last but not least, this is the newest palette to my collection, and it is the Danessa Myricks Lightworks Volume 5 palette. And it looks like this. It's such a beautiful, beautiful color story of duochromes, multichromes, iridescence, metallics, the works, right? And because I haven't tried this one yet, because it was super expensive, I want to give it a try before I run right out and buy anything else from the brand. Definitely not opposed to purchasing more things from the brand, but I really want to be sure that it's something I want before I put out that money. All right. And with that being said, I think that is finally everything for this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe before you go, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.